Hey, Luke here. In today's video we're going to be going through doing a front side air reverse. So basically we'll be riding on our toes, pop 180 onto the water and then spinning all the way through to continue in the same direction. So there are a couple of little steps you can do to set yourself up to land this trick. Three main steps that we're going to be going through on the water. So basically how to practice just doing little front side airs and then front side 180s, and then finally getting that full rotation as well, the rest of the rotation on the water. So another beautiful day down here at the Gold Coast. It's just a flat water session. You can really cross this move over into waves, which is probably one of the funnest parts about getting little frontside airs, is onshore conditions in the waves. You can start boosting airs and sort of landing back into the faces. But perfect trick to learn on flat water, because you can just try it over and over and over and over again and really start to get that muscle memory, start to get the feel of it and the flow of it on the flat water, and also it gives you some tricks to do while you're out on the flat water. So let's get into it. Let's talk about the very first thing that you can do in order to start practicing this. So step one to land this trick is getting comfortable popping and jumping off your toes. And this is probably one of the most challenging parts about it. It takes a lot of practice to actually get the weight right and the feeling right for jumping on your toe side. Now, the way that it happens is we'll be cruising along across the wind. So I've got the wind hitting me directly in the face right now, and we're going across the wind. And so you're cruising along toe side, plenty of speed, and then we're sort of popping up and we're pushing the board up into the wind like that. So we've got to get our nose up into the wind, and then as we're in the air, we're we're coming around like that, and we're landing going back that way. Okay? So the way that you can do that, the way you can do it is plenty of speed again, looking for a little jump, and then you're sort of lifting that front leg so that it's sort of pushing forward, and you're allowing that wind to get under the board. Once you're in the air, you need to rotate a little bit, because otherwise you're going to sort of land backwards, going backwards. So once you get into the air, you need to rotate and sort of land back towards the kite. Now, this is why a lot of people find it challenging. It's a strange feeling because the kite is pulling you backwards. So the kite is actually pulling you like this. And while you're just riding toe side normally, you're sort of edging against that pull of the kite, and so you don't notice it so much. As soon as you leave the water, as soon as you're in the air, the kite has a tendency to pull you back like this. Okay? So what you need to do is you need to allow for that, and that's in that motion where you turn the board and allow yourself to land slightly downwind. So you're loading up, popping, getting the board into the air, and then allow yourself to drift and land like that. Okay? So with the bar, what you're doing there, you don't have to do anything fancy. You don't have to throw the kite to 12 and pull in the bar or anything like that. You can have the kite just sitting at about 45 degrees, lots of speed, look for your ramp, pop. You can pull in the bar a little bit to get yourself a little bit weightless and allow that the board to come up under your feet, and then you can sort of sail back towards it. So you have to be prepared to sail back towards it, because like I said, as soon as you leave the water, it's going to pull you that way anyway. So just go into it with speed so you can get the board out of the water, get the fins out of the water, and then you'll feel yourself drifting back with the kite and sort of land towards it, and then you can edge back up onto your toe side. So that's step number one. You've got to really get comfortable with your takeoff. You've got to get comfortable with being able to pop up into the air. And so if you do that, then the rest of this trick's going to be easy. So get out there and practice that a lot until you're really comfortable, and you can even start throwing in some grabs, because you're only on your front arm riding toe side. You're riding like this, so this hand's always free anyway, so you can sort of pop up, grab, land like that, back down. That's step number one. So get out there, practice that. Okay, so now step number two is to start rotating all the way around into 180. So just like that same jump that you've been practicing now, you've got the kite sort of 45 degrees, you're looking for a little ramp, you're popping up, letting the board get under your feet, letting that wind push the board up onto your feet there, and then just slightly turning and landing. This time we're actually going to bring our foot all the way around like this. So what we're doing with the board is we're popping up, so the wind's under the board, and then before we were just going like this and landing, but this time we're going to use our back foot to really bring the board all the way around like this and land backwards. Now, when you land backwards, you've got to transfer your weight from your back foot, which is what's happening when you pop in. Okay, so you pop in off your back foot, your back leg's going to be a little bit more bent, and your front leg's going to be a little straighter as you sort of pop up like that. Okay, that's what's going to happen to get you pop. But as you rotate and land, it's exactly the opposite here, where you're going to be bending your front leg, and your back leg's going to be a little bit more extended, so that you can get your weight all the way over the center of the board. Because now you're going backwards on the board, okay? And because you've got your foot on the tail pad when you're just riding along, if you just land normally, the tail's just going to sink straight in. So you've got to be thinking about keeping your weight really centered as you pop, getting back over that front leg. Once you can land like that, just practice landing like that, and don't worry about complete the spin. So this is step number 2, where you're not completing the spin, you're just landing like this and then simply riding back the same way. So all you're really doing, and this can be really simple, is you're just riding along, pop, and then sliding back the other way. You may have been practicing that on a twin tip, okay? If you're used to doing that on a twin tip, where you're riding toe side, pop up, land on your heels, and then spin back. All right, it's exactly the same, except with the strapless. And this is why step number 1 was so important. You just have to be really comfortable getting into the air in the first place. Once you can land that going backwards, all you have to do is spin out. But I'll just give you a couple of tips for landing that going backwards. The hardest thing about landing that is having your weight over the center of the board. So remember, you've got to get your weight back over the center. So before you take off, just move your front foot forward a little bit, okay? So it's a little bit wider. So if I'm riding comfortably like this normally, just before you take off, foot goes forward, so your stance is a bit wider, and then when you're landing, your foot's going to be more forward, which is going to have your weight naturally more over the center of the board. So before you take off, foot's a little bit forward. The second thing you can do is actually take your back fin out. This is how I learnt it. It was a lot easier to learn it this way for me anyway, because once your fin is out, it means that it's less critical that you actually get your full rotation. So with 3 fins or 4 fins in the back of your board, the board has to be exactly facing backwards, which means you have to do the complete 180, otherwise you're not going to land it. If you take the back fin out, it's a lot more forgiving. If you only sort of jump to 90 and you need to slide a little bit out, then it's a lot more forgiving without that back fin. You can even do it with no fins. If you've never tried riding a surfboard with no fins on the kite, it's actually a lot easier than you're probably going to think. It's still, the rail is what really holds your upline, your upwind performance and stuff. Fins don't play a massive role in that, so you can take all the fins out if you want, and then you can practice those little pops and just sliding that tail around, and then you'll get less frustrated, I'd say, because as soon as you put that back fin in, you've really got to nail it. You've got to make sure you're doing the full 180 to be able to land it. So take the fins out, I'll take one fin out and just practice that and get the 180. So that's step number 2, okay? Again, practice, 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 just getting that 180 and being able to ride backwards and then spinning back around, just back to the same way and riding out toe side. All right, let's talk about step number 3, which is the completion of this trick, and that is spinning out underneath the bar on the water. So by now, you should be able to pop up, doing your little front side airs, even with a little grab, okay? And then you should be able to pop up, 180, land, spin back out. So you should be pretty comfortable at doing that. So now we're going to talk about how do we get underneath the bar. So to get under the bar, one of the biggest tips for this is swapping your hand, because what will happen, or might happen for you, it definitely happened for me, is when you pop the 180, see we're just on the back hand here, and so what tends to happen is you start steering the kite back over your head, or at least to 12 o'clock, and you lose all your momentum as you start to sink into the water. So as you pop in the 180, if you want to be able to spin out under the bar, you have to keep the kite a little bit lower, and as you rotate, you swap your hand onto the other side of the bar with your front hand. So now you're traveling backwards, but this hand is actually pulling the kite back down into the sort of forward position, and it keeps pulling you along backwards. At this point, you look over your back shoulder, right? And that motion alone of looking over your back shoulder should start spinning the board around, because we've got the fins at the back at this point, so it's really easy to pivot the board like that. Okay, so you look over your back shoulder, this spins back around, and then you just literally muscle this around into the front. And that's actually not too hard. There should be a little bit of slack on the lines there. Round into the front, and then you can put this hand back on the bar, and then you're riding out toe side again. So the biggest pitfalls for me with getting that final spin was definitely not bringing that hand around, or even bringing it around too late. So you sort of popping 180, riding like this, and like, oh, I need to rotate like this. Okay, so just doing it all a little bit late. But actually bringing it over your head isn't that hard. You'll find that that's pretty easy. So it's just a matter of keeping that little bit of momentum so that you can stay above the water as you're trying to complete that rotation. The second thing for me, really honestly, the hardest part was just getting those initial pops, just getting those frontside airs, because of that strange feeling that it has with the kite behind you when you're doing your jumps. A little bit different to everything else, but once you start getting it, it's just practice like any kite surfing trick really. But once you start getting it, it feels really good. It's a nice smooth little trick. One thing I would say, if you're not getting into the air, then more speed is always going to be a key here. You need to have speed, or maybe a little bit of a bigger ramp just to let yourself pop up to get the 180, and then to slide out, it's really all about getting on that front hand. And if you find that you fall in a lot, just getting a bit lower, staying centered on your board. When you're completing the 180, getting your front foot over the deck of your board, staying low, right? You swap the hand, and then you can just pivot around that back foot, and then pass the hand back down to your front hand. So look, I think that's it. Get out there and practice. Thanks guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed that video. I hope it helps you, and we'll see you in coming videos.